He is a pioneer in the business of fun, having created numerous characters for professional sports teams and corporations. My guest on episode 33 is Dave Raymond, a renowned keynote speaker and author of The Power of Fun, a book that teaches you how to prioritize fun and use it to overcome life's painful curveballs. In this episode, we talk about what it takes to have fun when doing almost anything, how he became the original Phillie Phanatic mascot for the Philadelphia Phillies baseball club, what the business of mascots are in today's sports world, and how developing a character can help each one of us live happier. Hear all of that and more from the hero of happiness himself, Dave Raymond, on the Sports in the Making podcast. This episode has visuals, so if you're listening, please be sure to subscribe to the Sports in the Making YouTube channel at Sports Making to see some of what we discuss. He is the original Phillie Phanatic. He is the author of a book called The Power of Fun, and he's also been called the Mascot Whisperer by the New York Times. Dave, thank you so much for joining me. There's a reason why I'm talking to you today, and I hope we have fun during this podcast.
It's my pleasure, Don. You don't mind me wearing my colors. I wore a tie to be respectful, but then I threw on the Phillies jersey because it's the time, right? And also, you're a member of the fraternity. You've donned on a character costume before, so I couldn't say no.
Thank you. Yeah. So not a lot of people know that, and there's a couple of reasons for it, but I didn't realize how important it was in my life until many years later. And I had the opportunity to work with you in the past. We'll get into that in a little bit. But first of all, I want to congratulate you and the Phillies, because as of the recording of this, we're recording this the day before the Phillies play in the 2022 World Series. So congratulations.
Thank you. It is a very wonderful time, certainly for me, my family, and for the city of Philadelphia. My Phillies family, I've been blessed with three families: the Raymond family, the University of Delaware family, which started everything, and then of course the Phillies. And this is the best time. It's the sport is a unifier, right? And when these type of championships run, even crime takes a dip, because everybody, including those that might not be willing to play by the rules or do some harm to us, they're taking a pause too. So it's amazing the bigger picture of what sports can be, and certainly during championship time. So it is a dreamlike state for me and for a lot of us.
The purpose of this podcast is to get behind the scenes and figure out some things, hopefully, that you haven't been asked before. I know there's a lot that we can cover, but you have a really interesting background. Your dad was a football coach, very well known. And talk to me about your family life growing up.
Well, I mean, I'll age myself, but I think people still have a reference to this. My 17-year-old said he got it too. It was a Leave It to Beaver life, all the way up until life came up and knocked on my door, and that wasn't until I was 35 years old. And so I was growing up in a little town, Newark, Delaware, where the best known asset there in that town is the University of Delaware, the Fighting Blue Hens. And I was born 2 years after my dad came to Delaware to coach baseball and to be the backfield coach for the university. He stayed at the university for 50 years. He was the head football coach for 36 years. And my earliest memories were me going to practice, standing on the sidelines, watching the football games with great interest, because when your father is a head football coach, winning truly is everything, because you could have a fear of you having to move to another town if your father wasn't successful at it. So I learned on an early age how important sports were to us and our family. But my dad won more than he lost, so he was an icon in this area, and truly in the history of college football coaches, he's been number 25 on the list of the 150th greatest football coaches, and he's celebrated by his induction into the College Football Hall of Fame. So that life and that backdrop of sports was our lifeblood. And I played sports, and I was smaller. I wasn't very fast. So everything I did in football and baseball growing up was because I worked hard at it, and because my father gave me a bag of footballs and said, go learn how to kick. Because it doesn't matter how good of an athlete you are. If you can kick, you can play on any football team. And I grew up, I was a pretty good athlete all the way through high school. I started in football. I made the all-star team in the state of Delaware my senior year, and I went off and I got a chance to play for my dad. I ended up being a punter for my dad, and those were the greatest experiences of my life. And truly, it was my father who wanted me to have another perspective other than just becoming a football coach, and he helped me get that 2-year internship with the Phillies that turned into the opportunity for me to be the first one that was stupid enough to don a Muppet costume to entertain the Philadelphia sports fans. So it was a beautiful
Well,
life. It was a wonderful life, and
yeah.
really had no life didn't whack me upside the head until I was in my early 30s.
Well, just so people don't forget who your dad was, Harold Tubby Raymond, who had 300 wins, 3 national championships, and like you said, he's in the College Football Hall of Fame. So, did you get your work ethic from him? And as we transition into you being the Phillie Phanatic, did that play into what you were doing?
I think there's no question that my work ethic came from both my parents. I was blessed to have two very strong parents, and my mother who started out in an old school, old fashioned way to, as my dad asked her, come and raise my family while I build my career. But my mom, because of some life circumstances, generated her own career, and she was. We stood on the giant shoulders of my mom, and my dad was my hero. But yes, I think the ethic in sports led me to understand that hard work was a separator. My dad said, show up, do whatever they ask you to do, and prove your value, and then you can reap the benefits of somebody who trusts you. And when he helped me get the job as an intern with the Phillies in '76 and '77, he said, "You'll never know who you'll meet, or what might happen." Because he wasn't too sure I was going to be a good football coach, because he understood as his youngest child that I really enjoyed being liked. I was trying to do things to please people, and he didn't have the heart to tell me that was not something that generally comes along with coaching a football team.
Right.
Even when you win as much as he did, there was a lot of people that were screaming at Tubby. So I think he knew better than I did, but he didn't tell me he wouldn't help me if I wanted to coach. He just said, you'll never know who you'll meet or what might happen. Go over and get a summer job with the Phillies. And that was very prophetic.
In the research that I've done, there's a lot of stuff out there. So if people are interested in listening to how Dave became the original Phillie Phanatic, there's a ton of stuff. But Bill Giles was the guy behind the Phanatic. When he first came to you about being the Phanatic, what went through your mind? Did you have any idea what it would be?
Well, I was a little bit less concerned than others because I was young, and the two-year internship with the Phillies was supposed to end in '77. So the spring of '78, they called me at my fraternity house where I was living on the campus of Delaware and said, "Hey, do you want to come back in '78?" And I said, "Yeah. Well, what do you need me to do?" They said, "Well, can you stay for all the games?" And I said, "Well, yeah, that's a perk. Of course I'd stay for the games." And then when they said they were going to pay me for the games, I said, "Well, gosh, tell me." And they said, "Go to New York and get fitted for the costume." And then that's when I got confused. And I said, "Well, what does that have to do with the?" And then they just said, "Go to New York and get fitted for the costume." And I went and met one of Jim Henson's original designers, Bonnie Erickson. She created Statler and Waldorf, the two old men that the puppets that argue in the balcony. And she was on a team of designers who created Miss Piggy. And Bill Giles didn't call just anybody. He called Jim Henson, got him on the phone, and Jim Henson said, you got to go to Bonnie. This is what she'll do for you. And Bill's mom, he was an enlightened leader. He told people that were interviewing folks to work for the Phillies to ask a couple of questions. The first one is, hey, you need to commit to work hard. And second, you must have fun while you're doing this. And then the job of those people were to teach everybody else those same two first lessons. So that was his direction to me. When he saw that I was a little nervous, but I was excited to do it, and the costume was delivered late so that I was going to wear it on the very first day I tried it on. No practice, no direction. And then when Bill saw that I was nervous, he said to have fun. He said, this isn't a serious effort. It could produce some really great things for us, but ultimately it won't unless you're having a good time. So figure out a way to have a good time. And that was it. He said G-rated fun, he told a college student to go have fun. He was getting paid for it. He figured he better give him some sort of a box to live in. And it was, that's enlightened leadership. You trust somebody, you believe that they have the right skill sets, even if they don't believe they have any skill sets, which I didn't. And he let me go. And if I made a misstep, we just talk about it. And I would say, I'll stop it. And he'd go, no, I just want to know why you did this. This is what I felt about it. What did you think? More importantly, what did the fans think? And then I actually started collaborating with Bill Giles. He's a president emeritus of the Phillies today. I learned so much about leadership from him and the Carpenter family and my dad and my mom. They were all great leaders.
You portrayed the Phillie Phanatic for 15 years. There's a phrase that I've been hearing that you're the best friend, the Phillie Phanatic's best friend. Is that how you describe it?
Yes, again, there was no real blueprint for this. The Phillies were very surprised, except I think Bill was even surprised that the amount of excitement and success the Phanatic had just 24 hours after he started on April 25th of 1978. We went on the Captain Noah show, which was a favorite children's television show. Timmy McCarver, Steve Carlton's catcher and Hall of Fame broadcaster, and he came on that show with us. And then we started to get requests from media outlets to follow me around. So one big one was called PM Magazine. So we said yes to them, and we showed them taking off the costume, drinking Gatorade, sweating. And we were excited about that exposure until we saw the piece. And we all gathered together to watch it. And we were done. Everybody looked at each other and said, no, we can't do that again. It just destroys all of the suspension of belief that the Phanatic is real. And from that moment on, we decided we don't want to say no to media because that's good for us. But there will never be a half in, half out moment. Dave Raymond's the best friend of the Phanatic. And when he walks in, shuts the door, and then with the magic of TV, he opens the door and the Phanatic comes out. And so it was my job to take care of the Phanatic, feed him, clean him, get him to the right places on time, and speak for him. And that's the way we've done it ever since. So Tom Burgoyne, who is now the best friend of the Phanatic and was a close friend just behind me 4 or 5 years, and then he's gone on to be the Phanatic's best friend for the last 28 years. So
yeah, and you guys did a phenomenal job. I mean, so there are people that know that I was the mascot. Obviously, the people that I worked with. I was the Phoenix Firebird, the AAA for the San Francisco Giants for 2.5 years. Similar story to you. I never really intended to be the mascot. So I'll just kind of share a little bit about that, about me. And it was kind of an interesting and fun time, a little bit nerve wracking at times, but it was fun. And so when you talk about donning the uniform and taking care of it, how hot did it get for you? How many calories do you think you burned at that time? And what was the reaction to fans early on?
Well, in the first night was the first time I actually went out and actually worked in it. And I was thinking, hey, double sessions in football back when the NCAA allowed that. That's what we did. I was in great physical shape because I was still playing football at that time at Delaware. So this was my summer job. So as soon as we got done, I got done with the work as a Phanatic. I go to summer practice, and so I was in great shape. Well, after 15 minutes in that costume, I realized this was a whole different type of crucible, and I was going to have to take breaks and be aware that physically this was demanding. And I was probably 176 pounds, maybe 178 pounds, and through the course of the first year, I dropped down 162 pounds. Each night, you'd lose 6 or 7 pounds. That was all water weight. So I had to drink a lot of water. But eventually, over that year, I lost about 11, 12 pounds. And I realized, hey, I got to eat. I got to focus on gaining weight. And that was something I'd never had done before, even in football. So I realized that this is a physical activity that was very difficult and demanding and not something to be taken light for because it's dangerous. So hydration, and I got some help from the Phillies trainers and from the University of Delaware trainers to figure out, the best way for me to hydrate. And this was just a little bit after Gatorade had been introduced, about probably 10 years earlier. And so that product was one that really helped me. But the physicality of it was also great because it showed that if fans had access too long to the Phanatic, he wouldn't be as special. So the fact that physically I had to take breaks also helped the performance because the Phanatic would pop out, be out for an inning or half inning, and then boom, he'd be gone. And then people will think, where is he? Where's the Phanatic? Where's the and we realized, and I learned very early on that this timing was important. The fans should not have complete access to the Phanatic all the time. We didn't do autograph signings or photo opportunities at the end of the game. One, because physically I was shot, and two, we needed the Phanatic to be special, and that has remained today. You will see the same type of Phanatic pacing in the World Series if you watch it on the games, and you will see him a few times when he's in the stands because the broadcast loves to show him now. But then the Phanatic needs to go take a quick breather. He's got to get something to drink and relax. So the physicality of it remains today to be a blessing because I'm still today know how to stay in shape. And for over 27, 28 years of my life, I was performing in costume because when I left the Phillies, I continued to do that work with my own character. I think that I'm physically better off now because of it.
It's interesting that you say that the mystique is part of not seeing him. I remember when I was the mascot, I didn't come out until the middle of the second inning because the first inning sets up the game, and then I would do the run around the bases, which I have another story for a little bit later, and then I walk the stands and then go out and drive my car, very similar to what you did with your ATV, and then I was done by the middle of the seventh inning. So it did kind of, I don't think it was intentional, but I did create a little bit of that mystique as well. So did you have a certain routine that you would do in the stadium, visiting booths or VIPs or anything like that?
Yeah, well, and Don, it's important to say that in the very beginning, there was no other instructions than to go out and have fun. So I had decided that my personality of the Phanatic would be frenetic and hyper. And then I realized that physically I couldn't maintain that pace. So I found sometimes when I sat down and I just stared or I fidgeted a little bit, when I saw a review of some film, I realized that was funny. So I kind of had Daffy Duck in my head, where if you remember the old Daffy Duck cartoons, he would physically bounce off the ceilings and the walls and then sit right next to somebody and then lay a big, wet, sloppy kiss on that person and then go bouncing off the walls again. And that's the way I wanted the Phanatic to be. He'd be this personal space invader. And this worked out over a few months of time. And then there was one time early on the first game that I realized I had gone too far and I couldn't actually walk back up the stands to get to my break area. I was too tired. And as soon as the last out was made in that inning, I jumped over the fence and I ran back behind the home plate where I could sneak out and get right to where my dressing room was. And fans went crazy. And I went, oh my gosh, I broke the fourth wall. And then I started waving to the umpires. And then I started coming out early before the game started, and visiting players would respond to me and would fool around with me. And then I started to developing, hey, the Phanatic is an extension of the fans' desire to get closer to the action. So they were living vicariously through the Phanatic. So I started doing anything that I could do that every fan wished they could do. Go up and put the whammy on the opposing pitcher, take the opposing player's hat and throw it over the outfield wall, and then leave so that player didn't have his hat. And it would freak people out, and the players would think it was so funny as long as it wasn't their hat that I did it to. And I started realizing that the players were excited about playing with this cartoon character. And I developed relationships with opposing players, and they would come to me for a 3-game, 4-game swing with ideas. Hey, I'm going to come out and do this, and then you do that. And then I started building routines. I didn't like a start and a finish. I like to do things where it looked spontaneous, and then I had things planted in the stands that I knew would be funny if something else wouldn't happen that was funny. But by far, the spontaneous activity of the fans were always funnier than anything I could have planned, except for fact when the cast of Nonsense they looked like real nuns, came out and jumped on the dugout with me and started dancing in a way that you would think nuns should not dance. That was a great routine, but it was all to promote that show called Nonsense, which was a Broadway or theater show that had gained a lot of notoriety. And so we did things like that, just like what's happening now with Miles Teller and with Jason Kelsey and all of the VIPs and celebrities. There would be those celebrities when we were in the playoffs in World Series, and the Phanatic was always part of their experience. They wanted to get a picture with the Phanatic. They wanted to dance with the Phanatic. So what you see the Fanatics doing today, and people are going, "Oh my gosh, that's Miles Teller." That's Sylvester Stallone. Oh, that's David Brenner, the great comedian. Oh, that's Cheryl Teagues. That's Heather Locklear. All of those things. That's Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm naming all these people. Phyllis Diller and Joan Rivers. All those people became fast friends with the Phillie Phanatic.
Yeah. Well, and I mentioned that you did this for 15 years. You did it from 1978 to 1993. Where I came across you was the Phanatic would go on tour on certain dates. And according to my research, you've been to 48 states and 5 countries, but you made a stop in Phoenix, Scottsdale Stadium, where I was when I was the mascot. And so you came and did your routine there, but we had to integrate. And it was great learning from you because like I said, I didn't want to do this job. And my story is the guy that was doing the mascot initially asked if I could cover him for him on a 4-game road trip. And I said, nope, no way. I don't want to do this. Long story short, I ended up doing it, and I did it the way that I thought it should be done. I felt like he was doing it to meet girls and all that stuff, which there's no problem with that really, but it wasn't fun. And so when I came out and I did it, I got on the dugout with my costume, and this is a quick look at it.
Oh, there he
So this was my costume, Phineas T. Firebird, and it had that big bubbly head on top. There was a vest that held it onto me, and I got on top of the dugout, and I just did a high leg kick, just trying something, and the response was amazing. Like I've never heard that before. And I thought, okay, maybe this isn't so bad. Plus, I was a non-paid intern in the organization to begin with, and this paid money. So I decided to continue with it. So when we met, it was a lot of fun because I learned a lot from you. I had a car that looked like this. The Malibu Grand Prix
Nice.
Sponsored it.
That's a little nicer than my 4-wheeler.
And then this is actually the routine of us performing.
How about that? Look at that.
It was just so much fun, like the personality that you brought to this costume, this character was amazing. Did you learn, you obviously learned along the way, but was there any indication or feedback that you got that helped you develop the character? And here's a shot of me just so people know that I did in fact perform as the Phoenix Firebird. How were you able to develop that character?
Well, I mean, in the beginning, I thought I was just shooting from the hip, and I think there was some of that. But many years later, when I was being interviewed, the reporter said, "Do you think because your mother is deaf that helped you communicate nonverbally?" And I felt bad because I thought he was taking advantage of something that I don't know. It's not that people didn't know my mom did not have her hearing, but I just felt like I was taking advantage of mom's story. So I went back and asked my mom what she thought, and she said, "Oh no, that absolutely. We were 3 years old when I went deaf." And mom and I communicated through her reading lips, and she had a hearing aid that could amplify sounds. And that was the first time I started thinking, well, maybe I do have a skill set. But a lot of the training and work that I do with the Power of Fun is about, especially people who are high performers have a tendency to think that their success was somehow luck. There's the imposter syndrome. An actor calls it the negative critic that's in your brain. It's very real. And it wasn't until maybe 6 or 7 years ago before I really started giving myself credit for creating this personality. And that was due to a lot of help and support and people around me. But it was also telling my mom's story more. And she was truly the one that inspired my creation of that personality. So I had a skill set with well over 10,000 hours of practice since I was 3 years old, until she passed away. And that skill set was natural. And so the work that I did in costume, I think, was at a higher level than many because I had this built in, well practiced skill set that I just didn't know or understand until many, many years later.
You've met a lot of people along the way. I imagine the Fanatic never really spoke to people to keep that mystique. What are some special stories that you have of being the Fanatic and how you've been able to either help people in a low point or help them celebrate a high? Are there any
Well,
things that really stand out to you?
yeah, I think, everyone asks me what my favorite moments are. And when I do my Power of Fun keynote, I start out with the audience and I ask them to dream with me. And I tell them that they're all unemployed, but not to worry about it. You're going to come work for me. And I walk them through, without them knowing it, what it was like to be the Fanatic until the very end when I say, how about that? Are you in? And they all go, yeah, I'm in. And well, that's exactly what it was like to be the Fanatic. And there's a part in there where, as we're doing the dream scenario, they have been given this super suit and they get to be somebody else who is well known and beloved. And then they say, well, I have a superpower. And I go, well, what do you mean you have a superpower? They said, well, when I'm a star of these shows, but then I realize I make everybody around me feel better. And then I say, okay, well, that's a surprise to me. I didn't know I actually gave you a superpower, but that's cool. Let's go to a retirement community where when you show up there, you make the staff and the residents feel better. And let's send you to a facility where children are dealing with really difficult mental challenges. And when you show up there, they've never been engaged like that before. And it was just because you showed up. And then I say, let's send you to a hospital room where families in that hospital room are dealing with unthinkable tragedy. But when you show up there, it's a celebration. There's hugs of gratitude and tears of joy, and the parents pat you on the back and say thank you for giving our son, our daughter, all of us, the exact medicine that we needed. And that's what truly was amazing about that, because unfortunately, there were many hospital rooms with that same scenario. There were many visits to people who just wanted a moment of joy. They wanted to meet the Fanatic, and that was one of the things that they were hoping to get to do. And it certainly was my privilege and honor and humbling to do that. But what I started to realize was not only was the Fanatic making them feel better, all of that gratitude I was getting back was making me feel better and made me happier. And that's been the secret to my message, is that you see the silly wackiness in all of these mascots, but what mascots do, that we don't give them credit for, is they connect on a deep emotional level seamlessly just by showing up, because they are the embodiment of a brand that their fans adore. And that's what's happening in Philadelphia right now. Sports is a unifier. You put the Fanatic in front of a set of stands and take a close look at who's in those stands: white, black, brown, men, women, young, old, heavy, skinny, people who identify as something differently than you might expect. And it doesn't matter, because to the Fanatic, if you're wearing the pinstripes, you're a member of the family. And for me, meeting all kinds of celebrities and having access to be on TV shows and all doing that, that was fun. That was beautiful. I got to be on Jimmy Kimmel's show just recently. They did a profile on HBO Real Sports. That all feels great, but nothing compares to being able to go out as a character and make people happy by just showing up. And now, for me, nothing makes me feel better than to be able to tell these stories and let people know you don't need to be a mascot to do this. And so for me, that's the beauty of all. I believe, Don, that I'm here right now at this moment with you. And every time I get up in front of people to talk to, I've been in this place specifically to do this. So my experience with the Fanatic was just my proving ground and my ability to learn. And then having life challenges that being the Fanatic helped me overcome, got me to where I am today, saved me actually. And I want everybody else to know that no matter how deep or dark the brutality of life can be, they can be in charge of helping themselves overcome that. So, it started with all of those wonderful memories, including being in the World Series parade in 1980. But nothing trumps the bigger picture, which is teaching us that we can be in charge of our own happiness. And when we watch characters work and do the work they do, we have to realize that something really important is going on that we might not give that credit for that moment.
You mentioned memories, and it brought me back to a place where, not only did I create memories for myself, but I created memories for other people. When I was at Universal Sports, I was a coordinating producer, so I got to have a team of producers. And when I first came in, I sat down with each of the producers and talked to them about what they wanted and their where they were, and I asked one of our producers, I won't mention his name, but where he was from, and he said he was from Phoenix. And we got into talking, and he said that he would go to Phoenix Firebirds games. And I said, "Oh yeah, what did you think of this?" And I said, what did you think of the mascot there?" Him not knowing. And he said, "Oh, that the mascot actually carried me around the bases in a base run." And I said, "What years were you there, do you think?" And he's like, "Oh, it's probably 6 or 7." And it was the time frame that I was there. And I said, "I carried you around the bases." And he looked at me like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I was the mascot." And he goes, "Are you serious?" So he still remembered that, this many years forward. I had a different appreciation for what people do in mascots, having been one. The Phillie Phanatic was voted Forbes 2008 Best Mascot in Sports, Best Mascot Ever by Sports Illustrated Kids, a charter member of the Mascot Hall of Fame, which was partly your doing. Um, you're on Good Morning America. And I think the most interesting thing is MLB's most obnoxious mascot fan by Play USA, a
Yeah,
website
that's a
called Play
badge of
USA.
honor,
So,
Don, right?
yeah.
Because those
So how
those
do you
are all
feel
people that
about?
are jealous of the Fanatic.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you feel about what you've been able to accomplish with the Fanatic, and also where you're going now with your industry in motivational speaking?
Yeah, I think the Fanatic was a collaboration, and I've been in this business for a long time. I've been claimed to be responsible for the creation of hundreds of mascots, and including Gritty. But every single one of those was a collaboration. I didn't walk into the Flyers and say, "Oh, here's Gritty. This is what it's going to be." I would tell them what I believed in, and I told them what the process was that the Phillies followed unknowingly, and over time I kind of deconstructed what was happening and created this process. And so the Fanatic's personality, I was fortunate enough to be there first, so I created a personality that continues to grow and evolve like every other living, breathing entity. And so the Fanatic has been around for 44 years, and I feel a very strong part of that entity of the Fanatic. I feel like I'm part of him everywhere he goes. And I know that Tom Burgoyne, the current best friend of the Phillie Phanatic, feels the same way, because we're best friends, which isn't difficult to imagine, because we both feel and think alike. We love Philadelphia and sports. We've grown up through it. We've seen it. And that personality is going to remain hundreds of years from now, unless something awful happens to our world. And Gritty's going to be here for hundreds of years. And it's a collaboration, and the Phillies and their light leadership started it. They happened to pick the right guy in me to be the first one, which at the time I thought was just luck. And now I recognize, no, I contributed to that. So I look at it with great joy and great pride that is, part of me. I'm part of it and will always be. And the joy the Fanatic continues to deliver is because of the stewardship and the collaboration and the support of the Phillies front office. Because Bill Giles is not there now; he's president emeritus, but Dave Buck is running the team, and there's a whole other group of sales and marketing people. And what they've all learned how to do is treat and appreciate the Fanatic as a living, breathing brand extension that is very valuable. And they're very careful with him. And so I'm proud to have been a part of that. By no means I am the only reason why that it's had the great success it's had. So um, very prideful that I'm part of it, but also understand it's living well beyond me, which is the best compliment that I could receive is that I was part of something that is going on for a long time. So blessed and thrilled to have had the opportunity, and now I'm here doing what I'm doing that I'm also proud of, that I believe is changing people's lives and their focus and making them better. And I can continue to do that hopefully well into my 80s or 90s, and still be able to deliver the same message that's universal, that people believe in, that fun is a tool for us to be happier, healthier, and more productive.
Let's talk about the mascot creation process first, and how valuable is a mascot to a team in today's world, and how do you help create those characters?
Well, first and foremost, it has to be valued. If the team does not value it and don't believe it's as important as anything that they could possibly do to market or sell their brand, then I don't work with them. And I learned this because in the beginning, because I was a new business, I worked with those folks. And there was nothing wrong with them other than the fact that if they didn't really care much for the exercise, we just need to get a mascot because everybody has a mascot. So I weeded that out as my business grew, and I required the clients to invest in this in a serious manner. So we take fun seriously. That was the first step, and then it's the authentic storytelling that you do first. You don't worry about what it's going to look like. You don't worry about what shape it is. You may understand what colors it's going to be because it's got to relate to your brand. But at the end of the day, even that doesn't matter as long as you tell the right story. And that story is about your company, about your founders, about your leaders, about your community, about your customers and partners. And so I require my clients to dive deeply into a story. Then they tell that story. From that story, imagery starts to show themselves. Even there, it may be a particular animal that they think fits this story, fits this particular animal, or maybe there's something from their community that is important to represent visually. And then once you get those ideas, we move our designers in and they start to draw sketches using the backstory and some of the potential imagery. And then we get to the point where they say, that's our character. Thank you. We spend maybe as much as 6 weeks doing the drawing. And then we build that. And then the next steps are, well, how do we authentically roll the character out? Who's going to inhabit the character? And are you going to pay somebody a full-time opportunity to do this, or are you just going to grab somebody from high school and give them a part-time job? Because we would recommend against that, because the idea of caring is to have somebody that's going to be your full-time performer, coordinate the program, and be paid accordingly to how well they do for your business. And if they do all those things well, they are going to have enough success to return 2 or 3 or 4 times the amount of their investment. And then that bigger investment in the beginning falls off because you're not investing in a new character because you've already created the programming. So we need somebody to be serious, and we say put the word fun, put serious in front of it, and then it's going to be a serious effort. Storytelling, authentic storytelling, then imagery, and then care and support of the program by getting the best performer they can, the best coordinator they can, and then be a steward of that character as it grows and lives. And those are those 3 simple steps: authentic story, a great unique design, and then talented people to run it.
And talking about the performers, I mean, you kind of were thrown into it for all intents and purposes. I reluctantly did it. I know there's probably tons of stories out there like that, but I do know there's a segment of people that really want to become a mascot. And I saw an article recently in the on the Denver Nuggets mascot Rocky. I'm sure you know what this is, how much he gets paid. Rocky the Mountain Lion gets paid $625,000 a year. And I'm just going to read a quick list of all the other ones. Harry the Hawk at $600,000, Benny the Bull, $400,000, Go the Gorilla for the Phoenix Suns, $200,000, and Hugo the Hornet, $100,000. It's big business now.
Yeah. Well, why do you think they pay them that, Don?
Because I believe it's because they make a connection to the community, they entertain, and they're able to tie what may be perceived as just sports into personality and lifestyle and for that club. It's a big marketing
All right,
opportunity.
great. So that, and I'll do what I do to my students in the first day of class because you answered it the way most of them do it. Then I'd say, okay, great, but why do they pay them that? You just said something, but why do they pay him that? What is the bottom line reason why they pay them that?
This might be a trick question. Is it?
Because,
It's the story.
because they earned for that team 3, 4, 5, 6 times what they pay
Fair
for
enough.
them. So no one, and this is, I want everybody to be altruistic and want to be able to say, hey, my job is to go out and entertain, because that's true. But you will only get that opportunity to do that if you actually can help them drive revenue. If you just boil it down to the business, and it's important to recognize this as a performer, anybody who's listening, go learn the business, go study the business, be as good out of the costume as you are in the costume, and then recognize you will never get paid what you think you're worth unless you can drive 4, 5, or 6 times that amount to the team. And that's why they have them. And then there are incalculable benefits to a brand like Gritty or the Fanatic that goes beyond their market. I mean, I travel all over the country and speak, and some of my clients go, well, this isn't really a Philly atmosphere. I go, don't worry about it. My story is not about Philadelphia. My story is about humans and how to make humans better. And then we get there and they go, wow, I was really surprised how many people know the Fanatic and are big fans of the Fanatic, even though they're not fans of the Phillies. I go, that's why the Phillies and these other teams pay a good amount to have somebody who's very good at bringing that character to life. So it wasn't a trick question, because most of my students, Don, don't get it because they want to
Yeah.
think they want to think they're beyond that. Which, as a performer, you want to think about the good that you're bringing in, because that happens anyway. But I tell them, like, you also have to understand the economics of this, because you will not have a job long if you're not providing value, both value beyond a spreadsheet, but also direct revenue. You need to do that as well. So it's I love to. I don't want to burst their bubble, because then we go into all the other fun things that you truly want to be known for, but we are always connecting it back to business. And I think the reason why our boot camp, and we have an asynchronous online boot camp now, the reason why ours is, I believe, more comprehensive and better than what UCA does or some of the other boot camps out there, is they don't talk about the work out of costume that you need to do. And I've run auditions and helped people get seen by organizations to hire them. And my clients in the beginning will say, we want the best person in costume. And then when I bring them 10 candidates and we phone screen them and then audition them, the client will say, I kind of like Don. He's not quite as good as Judy is, but we really think Don's going to be better fitting our organization. They're going to hire Don before they hire Judy, even if Judy flies around the gym. And that's something that I'm telling my performers. Yes, you have to work on your craft in costume, but you really have to understand the business, and you have to be a good person, and you have to be able to integrate and be a good team member and to collaborate and not be a diva. The diva word is thrown around our industry a lot, and some of those folks get struggle with leadership when they don't realize that being a diva is not helpful to them in the long run.
Now, you've mentioned speaking in front of people a few times, and that brings me to this. The Power of Fun is your book, but you also have you're a motivational speaker. Explain how that is working for you and companies and what benefit they get out of that.
Well, it's amazing, and I appreciate the question, Don. It has been something that has matured over time. I've been a speaker since a few years into doing the Fanatic, and I would just go to community groups and explain, who the Fanatic is and what he's there for. And then I got involved in 2006 in a team building company, which I'm a founding owner of, and I still own part of that business. And that was teaching employees how to engage their employees. And those leaders said, well, okay, Dave, we want you to come in and tell our employees why we're allowing them to play. And so I started to develop this concept, and I started to do some discovery. And then during the pandemic, I studied positive psychology, and And what I truly do, in the simplest terms, I use the stories of the fanatic and telling them that I learned these unknowingly while I was the fanatic.
As proclaimed by Sports Illustrated, the best mascot in all of sports. I cannot begin to tell you how amazing it was to be the fanatic, to get paid more money than I knew I was worth, and my job simply was to have fun. But that brought me to you today, because I've got 4 lessons I learned in my 17-year career as being the fanatic, and they will help you tap into the power of fun and be happier now. And we're going to all do it just like I did it, by being the fanatic.
When I went through my mom's death and brain cancer and my marriage falling apart at the same time in my life, and feeling like committing suicide was an option for me, I discovered that my work inside the Fanatic's costume saved me, because it distracted me. And the philosophy that I teach now is that we need to look at fun in a different context. The fun that most of us know, and what if I asked you, Don, what you did for fun, or put that in your head, I'm assuming I know some of the things that you would be thinking of: family, fun, going having a drink with my buddies, going on a trip, a vacation. And that's all well and good. But what we do, the same way when we develop mascots, is we take the word fun and put serious in front of it. And there's a process of your own intentional activities to focus on your mood, and learning how to do that by doing it daily, and looking at fun as a serious tool to not only help you feel better, but one that could help you overcome the most difficult challenges in your life. Even the challenges that may take somebody's life, knowing these secrets and these tips of intentional activities can help you end your life in a way that is much better than if you didn't know how to do that, and help those people around you that are sorry that you're leaving. It's amazing what the power of fun can do when you look at it as serious fun and not think of it just as downtime and off time. And so I engage my audience with dreaming, with bringing them into the green fur of the fanatic, and understanding what the fanatic was trying to tell me for all those 15, 16 years I was with the Phillies, to make me pay attention. And unfortunately, I didn't pay attention until just about 12 years ago. And that's when I really started getting up in front of audiences and explaining to them that I had what I believe is a secret or a superpower for all of us to achieve greater things in life, to be happier, more productive, and to fight the brutality of life, and build resilience. And then, the next time life comes up and knocks on your door, you open the door and say, "Hey, come on in, have a lemon square. I've been here
Yeah.
before. I know how to take care of you." And it is a wonderful message that is validated for me by what the audiences come up and talk to me afterwards. And so the motivational speaker isn't my favorite moniker, but I understand that's where I live. But I'm honest with my audiences. This isn't easy. Life is not just simple. Hey, I wake up and I want to be happy, and that's the way, and it's going to work. It's a constant battle. To live long in life, you are going to be battling the brutality of life multiple times, and then you're all going to experience, whether it's unexpected or not, you are going to experience your own time to leave this earthly plane. I have great faith that we're going on to do even bigger things after this time, but I want to make that as healthy and happy as I possibly can, and teach others how to do the same.
Well, DaveRaymondSpeaks.com is your website. I checked it out before we talked, and it's really fantastic. You have some examples on there that I think are really interesting, especially for business leaders who are very serious. The fun part of it, people have to enjoy what they're doing, and if they don't, it makes it more difficult. And I think that's what I gathered from the clips that I saw on your website. So anyone who's interested, check it out. But yeah, you're doing a great thing, and as we wind down here, I've got a couple more questions for you. The Tommy Lasorda incident, I couldn't let go. In the brief amount of time that we have left, how was that relation? How did that happen? Was it scripted? Did it come in a spontaneous way? What's behind that?
Well, it was authentic. I considered myself a friend of Tommy Lasorda's. Every time he saw me Socially, he'd ask me how my dad was because he grew up in Norristown and he knew my dad's history. And I always loved that he was considerate of my dad and what my dad had done and asking me how he was doing. I met Tommy in '79 when we were in Japan and the Phanatic was the mascot. I just saw that when they were competing orbit against the Phanatic in the paper today, they mentioned that he represented baseball in the Japanese tour. Well, I did that back in '79. Tommy Lasorda was the manager of the National League All-Star team. And I got to know him there. And we both would fool around in front of the Japanese fans. And the Japanese fans loved the interaction of Tommy Lasorda, the baseball god, because that's the way they thought of him, and the silly Muppet. And so he recognized that he could get a rise out of people by playing around with me. So all the years later, he would come in and he would yell and scream at the Phanatic in front of his players. He'd use the salty language that he was so well known for. And the players would laugh. And I believe he realized that that was a great way to relax his players because they would laugh at Tommy, chasing the Phanatic around. And the time that he went crazy, that everybody, the whole story is because of that 3-minute video clip that millions of people have watched, was that day when he came into Philadelphia. His team was not doing well. They were at the bottom of their division. He was in a weight loss program with Oral Hershiser that was sponsored by Slim Fast, so he hadn't had pasta in a while. And he had kept the Dodgers uniform away from me to the point where I made my own Tommy Lasorda uniform. And when I showed up, he was like, "Oh my gosh, how did he get the jersey?" And then he went nuts. And in Philadelphia, there's a WIP, it's our sports talk radio, and there's a afternoon show where Johnny Marks and Ike Reese are the hosts. And when I told Johnny Marks this after they brought me in to talk about Tommy after he passed away, Johnny Marks told the best way I should ever tell the story from now on. And he said, "Oh, so Tommy was okay with it until he wasn't."
Yeah.
So that's the 2-second version. I gave you the abridged 20-minute version. But I truly am grateful to Tommy because he had a personality that is kind of weeded out of baseball today. It's what I miss about baseball. I don't think we'll ever have that type of personality. He represented baseball well. He was an incredibly great motivator of his, of these high-priced superstar baseball players. He could motivate them and bring them together by doing little things like what he did with the Phanatic. He had many other ways he did it, but I just happened to be one of his tools. So I was proud to be a tool of Tommy Lasorda.
All right, couple more questions for you. I've been thrown out of a game as the mascot. Kerwin Danley was an umpire in the minor leagues. He went on to have a successful career as an umpire in the majors, but I was mimicking kind of what you did behind him, and he caught wind of it and he threw me out of the game. He threw me out of the stadium. How was your relationship with umpires?
I had great relationship with him, and unfortunately, I never got thrown out. But the only reason why Kermit throw you out because he was having a good time. You figure, what, I'm gonna toss this bird right out of here and get the fans angry at me because I don't care. He might have been on a long road trip. I work with Kermit. I work with Doug Harvey. His nickname was God because Doug, he's tall, gray. He looked like Moses coming down from the mount. Statuesque, good-looking guy, and he was a no-nonsense guy. But he came to me and said, "Look, I'll fool around with you as long as you do two things. Don't make fun of us as umpires. Have fun with us as authority figures, and I will always work with you. And then the second thing I want you to do is no matter what we talk about, if at the middle of the game I tell you no, you need to stop it right then and there." And I followed Doug Harvey's rules, and that's why I got along with Eric Gregg and Lee Wire and Ed Montague, and all of these great umpires who I got to know as friends. And as long as I gave them free stuff for their nieces, nephews, and kids, they do anything for me. So you forgot the most important part, Don. You need to bribe them first.
I did. I was still learning. That was my first season.
I should have had that lesson with you. Go get to know them, bribe them, give them free stuff. And man, hey, Don, what do you want to do today?
Yeah. What was your most memorable skit?
I think the thing that I loved doing was I had the little plastic novelty helmets. And whenever we were playing the Mets, this is when I first did it, I played New York, New York as I rode out on the four-wheeler. And of course, by the time I got to jump off my four-wheeler on the other side of the field in front of the visiting dugout, everybody would be booing because they didn't know I was playing it. It was just playing. So I'd look around like I was angry too, and then I would pull out 3 Mets not mini helmets. They were regulation size batting helmets, but they were plastic. And then I would be dressed in a tuxedo, and I would dance to Frank Sinatra's New York, New York, and I would smash every single one of those helmets at the certain point of the song, and then the crowd went nuts. Sometimes I'd bring out an apple and I'd smash the apple because of Big Apple. And once that became really a fan favorite, I started to do it with all the other teams. That was a moment when Bill Giles wanted to know why I was doing it. I was getting letters from teachers saying I was violent, and so he went and watched me do it and said, "Yeah, I think you can keep doing it." But he said, you need to pick 2 teams. Those are the only 2 teams you can do with it, and all the other teams you have to come up with something different. So there's the enlightened leader stepping in and helping me be better. So that was my favorite skit because it led to all of those other things that we did.
All right, final question before we sign off. I see a bunch of things in the background there with what you've got. What's the most memorable thing that you have from the Phanatic?
Well, I would say right here, you'll see in this, I'll take it out for you and show you. I went to work in the greatest National League Championship Series in the history of baseball. Was ironically the Phillies beating Houston in 1980. And then we went on to the World Series to play Kansas City. And I went out, they invited me out to work pre-games in Houston at the Astrodome during the NLCS. And the team wanted me to do it. Well, the Phillies sent me out to Kansas City, not asking them. And they decided they didn't want me to do it. So on that series, I sat in both of those dugouts as a bat boy because they didn't have a seat for me for the World Series game. So when I was sitting in the dugout in Kansas City, the 5th game of the World Series before we came home to win it in 6 games, Tug McGraw, who was a good friend of mine, was relieving, and he was pitching to Jose Cardinal. And Jose Cardinal swung at a screwball and fouled it back into our dugout. And I caught that ball, and let's see if we can get this to focus for a second. You see the World Series logo. You see that it's all mudded up, so it was in play. So I have a baseball that was in play in the 1980 World Series. This is the first time Major League Baseball identified it. So it's my most prized possession because of a couple of things, because of my relationship with Tug, because that was the game before we came home to win it in 1980. Tug was on the mound for that game as well. And I have a whole nother story about where I believe I have the actual last ball from 1980. I can't prove it, but that's a story for another time. But it looks just like that one.
Well, Dave, I'd love to have you back in the future if you're willing to. I have kept this memento for as long as we've met each other. That's it says to Don from the Phillie Phanatic.
Don, that's worth 50 cents by now. Hang on to that for another 300 or 400 years. It'll be worth something.
Yeah. But thank you again for joining me. I appreciate it. Good luck to the Phillies this year, and continued success with the Mascots. And maybe we can catch up on the Mascot Hall of Fame and see if the Phoenix Firebird can get in there.
Hey,
somehow.
We'll work it out. I don't make those decisions, but I might be able to get you noticed.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, Don, thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks to Dave for sharing some of his personal journey, explaining how fun can and should be part of any person's or company's objectives, and giving us a glimpse of what it takes to be a professional mascot. Again, this episode has visuals, so visit @SportsMaking on YouTube to see what it was we talked about. To book Dave for your next speaking engagement, visit DaveRaymondSpeaks.com, pick up his book, The Power of Fun, to find out more about his memorable Phanatic stories and his fun process, and also check out the MascotHallOfFame.com to see all of the inductees and vote for your favorites that are currently nominated. And while you're there, drop a line and nominate the retired Phoenix Firebird, former AAA club mascot for the San Francisco Giants, for future consideration. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe to @SportsMaking on YouTube or your preferred podcast listening platform. More great episodes are on their way, and if there's someone that works in sports that you'd like to hear from, drop a comment on YouTube or on the Facebook page. Also, like and share, and reviews are always appreciated. Thank you for listening to Sports in the Making. I'm Don Cardona.